Welcome to Colorado State University's podcast, The Audit, where host Stacy Nick talks with CSU faculty about topics ranging from their latest research to current events.
Ah, the humble pocket, a small but mighty detail that's equal parts function, fashion, and for many, frustration, especially when they're missing or too small to be useful. Colorado State University's Avenir Museum of Design and Merchandising is celebrating this often overlooked feature with its new exhibit, Thanks, It Has Pockets. This fascinating showcase dives deep into the pocket's surprisingly controversial history, along with its role as a symbol of empowerment, economic trends, and even political movements. From its ties to the women's suffrage movement to its evolution as a statement of autonomy, the pocket is far more than a convenient place to stash your wallet or phone. It's a reflection of social change. Today I'm speaking with CSU Assistant Professor and Avenir Curator Paula Alaszkiewicz about the process of bringing this exhibit to life, the stories behind the pocket, and the hidden gems unearthed in the Avenir's collection. Thanks so much for being here. I love your shirt.
Thanks. It has pockets.
That is one of those things that I feel like it's an automatic reaction almost. We really do love when anything has pockets. Was that kind of the inspiration behind this exhibit?
It wasn't necessarily the inspiration, but it came to represent lots of the findings that were uncovered throughout the exhibition process and encapsulate all of them, including very complex historical themes and ideas, in a phrase that many of us, if we have not said, have certainly heard at some point. The inspiration for the exhibition was actually a single object in our collection. It was a mohair coat from the 1930s, a lovely lilac color, and it has large, about 8 by 10 inch, teardrop-shaped patch pockets. And those pockets represented for us the perfect marriage between function and fashion, and those two ideas, which sometimes are compatible, sometimes are incompatible, became one of the major organizing themes.
How did pockets evolve from their origins? Because they started as small purses worn by both men and women in the 15th century and then graduated to what we now know as the pocket. Tell me about that evolution.
The need to carry one's personal possessions around with them is a pretty universal human need that we see across cultures, across history, and for most of history, as you mentioned, that need was satisfied with purses or pouches that were worn by both men and women. Of course, an external purse is less secure, more prone to falling off, being forgotten, theft. So it's a natural evolution to want to incorporate the portability offered by a purse into something more secure. The evolution into pockets integrated into garments is part of a bigger evolution in sewing and garment construction techniques that happens in the medieval period in Europe. This is the time when professional tailoring takes off. So we see all kinds of remarkable innovations in garment construction that become much more complex. By the 15th century, we are seeing a more intensified binary gender distinction between clothing intended for men and clothing intended for women.
This is where the big divide starts, huh?
It starts before this, but those tailoring techniques really give rise to greater variation in cut. Of course, this is all tied up in other things that are happening in culture and society more broadly, but men's clothing in the 15th century evolves to be baggier. I like to tell my students in fashion history that men's clothing has a certain swagger to it in that there is a lot of volume built up around the hips to increase the scale of men's bodies as they're walking. Well, all of that volume is the perfect place to incorporate pockets.
Why did pockets become integrated into men's clothing, not so much into women's clothing? What happened there?
That is the major question. From the evidence that we have access to, We know that certain women of status, like Queen Elizabeth I, ordered gowns with pockets integrated into the garment itself.
Smart lady.
Smart lady and a lady of means and status. For most women without such means and status, that was not a common experience. We have to think big picture for why that might be. It's not simply because the cut of clothing is different and the construction is different. As the capitalist marketplace is expanding, women needing to carry their possessions around with them and carry money around with them just wasn't a common factor, because participation in that capitalist arena and public marketplace was by and large the role of men. So to need pockets, to be able to go out and participate in public life, really was not consistent with the dominant gender ideas of the time.
So women didn't need pockets.
Exactly. Didn't need or shouldn't have. One of the major themes to be aware of with pockets is, of course, the privacy that they offer. Pockets hidden within clothing provides a private place. At this time, women were subject to a legal concept of coverture, which essentially suggests that married women are under the cover of their husbands. So all property, including personal possessions, was owned by the husbands rather than the women themselves. Pockets, therefore, are a way that women negotiate and can experience both privacy and property ownership at a time when those ideas are largely denied to them. From about 1650, the mid-17th century, through to the end of the 19th century, the pockets that are most commonly worn by Euro-American women are actually detachable tie-on pockets.
Like panniers?
Yeah, worn underneath panniers, perhaps in the 18th century. So they're not structural, but they are large, flat pouches, and they range from probably an average of 12 to 16 inches, so they were quite large, and they would be worn somewhere under or within the many layers of skirts and undergarments that women are wearing at this time. The outer skirt would have a slit in the side that would provide access to this pocket that's worn underneath the skirts. So again, taking us to the idea of privacy, right, of possessions being held within this much more intimate, private space between different layers of clothing, close to the body. Of course, these tie-on pockets are less secure than pockets that are incorporated into clothing, but their versatility and flexibility is also something that is really privileged and was prized by the women who used them.
And at one point, pockets became controversial. I'm thinking of the era of the suffragettes, where pockets were maybe not made illegal, but they were controversial because that's where women could hide pamphlets, voting pamphlets, and literature.
Pockets throughout the 19th and early 20th century become very symbolic in the women's suffrage movement and broader movement for women's rights. There was an American women's rights activist in the 19th century named Elizabeth Cady Stanton. She described pockets as a question of morals rather than a question of fashion. And she suggested that without access to safe, practical, functional pockets, women were subject to unsafe situations like being more prone to being robbed or being in an accident because they're too preoccupied carrying all these things in their hands and they don't see a carriage coming down the street. She actually appeals to a broader social good that could be achieved if women can have pockets. So she shares in one article that she wrote an anecdote about a young woman who's helping her blind mother cross the street. And in helping her mother cross the street. Her hands are full. She's carrying her purse in her hand in an unsecure way, and she is robbed. The man who robs her ends up going to prison, and Elizabeth Cady Stanton summarizes that if only women have pockets, not only would this young woman still have her money, but this thief would still have his liberty. Fast forward to the early 20th century, as the suffrage movement is becoming more organized, pockets now become a metaphor for women's right to vote.
Pockets are often viewed as functional, but they've also been used as a fashion statement, a design element. Can you share an example of how pockets have been used in fashion to make a statement?
One particular example would be the American sportswear designer Bonnie Cashin. We have two of her pieces in the exhibition. Pockets were very important to her design practice in creating clothing that was both stylish and functional for women who are on the go. In 1940, she actually asked her mother to sew a purse onto her coat because she was frustrated by the lack of pockets in her coats. So this is a preoccupation that predates her time as a designer. One of the first big moves she makes is to patent a design for a hands-free purse coat or skirt, so a variation of what her mother made for her, where a purse with a little clasp, kiss clasp that opens, is integrated into, let's say, the side of a skirt. She continues on in this way by making pockets that are very visible and conspicuous. So one of the really interesting things about pockets is they can either be hidden within the side seam of a garment or within the lining, of course, or they can be really visible and celebrated on the exterior of the garment. And that's what we see someone like Bonnie Cashin doing, is making the pocket really big, really visible, and calling attention to it. We also have a piece towards the end of the exhibition by the American designer Richard Blackwell, who is most known for glamorous Hollywood designs. And the piece that we have in the exhibition is an evening dress, high neck, sleeveless, long, very elegant evening dress made from a metallic, colorful, floral printed silk. And down the side of the skirt, on each side, it has 3 large cargo pockets.
Interesting choice.
Very interesting choice. Would these pockets even be used by the person wearing this dress? Perhaps for a lipstick and a credit card, but the silk is so delicate that their functionality is somewhere on that hypothetical scale of function to fashion. So we really see in that case the example of the pocket as design element. It may not need to be used, but it's there to celebrate the pocket.
You know, if we're talking about these tiny pockets or fake pockets, I think that's a common frustration for women's clothing. Why do these design choices persist, that idea of the fake pocket? I don't think there's nothing more irritating than going to put your wallet away and realizing, oh no, this is the fake pocket. Why?
Yes, you've touched on what I think is a universal frustration for many of us who have purchased clothing that either has pockets that are so small they're non-functional, or worst of all, the fake pocket. What is remarkable to me, having worked on this project, is the way that many of these themes continue to resonate across history, that we're no longer in a fashion system and social system that fully denies pockets to women. But there was a study conducted in 2018 that found that the iPhone 10 could fit in 100% of the front pockets on men's jeans and only 40% in the same pockets on women's jeans.
That tracks, yeah.
So many of the themes and frustrations that were encountered historically continue to resonate today. Some of the reasons are similar to the reasons in the past, and some are different. By and large, fashion is still a system that operates on a pretty strict gender binary, and the way that clothing is designed for genders in a binary system emphasizes certain parts of the body, emphasizes certain ideas of functionality or decorativeness, and that is a factor in why clothing is cut in different ways, and clothing for one gender might be cut with more ample room for larger pockets versus clothing for another gender. One of the most common arguments historically and today for lack of pockets or fake pockets is that they, quote, disrupt the line of the intended silhouette. That in the way designers have imposed a vision of what women's bodies should look like in this ideal sense. They're really imposing the structure and shape onto the body, that to have a pocket, and heaven forbid have that pocket full of things, would disrupt the idealized line and silhouette that they are trying to achieve or impose. The final reason is one that's more about economy, that resonates in our increasingly fast-paced, ultra-fast fashion landscape, and that is that pockets require more labor and more material. And in a system that privileges profit over anything else and is looking for ways to reduce costs, possibly cut corners, cutting pockets would be a way to achieve that.
Well, that gets into a question I wanted to ask you about. There's that famous economic theory that ties the length of a woman's skirt to the economy. And I'm wondering, is there a similar connection between pockets and the economy? Are we about to see a lot of fake pockets? That was a big sigh.
We might be. Certainly in economically unstable or turbulent times, we do see throughout history economies being made, simplifying, streamlining, doing away with excess, whether it's wartime rationing and the number of buttons and the width of lapels and hems is all regulated to reduce an excess use of material. Or in the 1930s, when silhouettes become more streamlined to use less material, we do have numerous precedents for such solutions to economic hardship. We may indeed see pockets be one of those luxuries that is cut in economically difficult times.
Yeah, I was thinking about the excess of the 80s and maybe even the early 90s when I'm thinking of like Michael Jackson's red leather jacket that had like a zillion pockets, no real reason, but a ton of them. And cargo pants became a big thing in the 90s. And the Junko jeans with the giant pockets, which I just saw a meme of a influencer puts on a pair of Junko jeans and proceeds to put an unholy amount of an iPad. I can't even remember. There's just a ton of things in these pockets, and they just keeps going. She just. So I guess we gotta hope for a resurgence in Junko jeans. Is that what we need?
Something that interests me very much as a historian about fashion today, when I think in 50 years, in 100 years, when historians look back to the 2020s, how will they define the dominant style of the decade? There are so many styles happening simultaneously. So one narrative, maybe we'll see in the next few years, if pockets are one of the design elements that is cut or further reduced in size because of economic pressures. A counter narrative to that is the resurgence of Y2K, late 90s, early 2000s fashions particularly in the demographic of our students. I see it in my classes, who are privileging, for many reasons, buying vintage and secondhand over new. And that means they are sourcing cargo pants, like the ones you mentioned, from the early 2000s that have a plethora of pockets. I mean, more pockets than one would know what to do with. We have a pair in the exhibition that are from about 2000, a pair of cargo pants, and they have 10 pockets on them that provide a total 308 square inches of storage.
That sounds like about the right amount, I think. They should all have that much.
You could go camping and not take a backpack. You just have your early 2000s cargo pants. So we may see those two narratives coexisting.
Why do you think, because we're talking about this conversation, the humble pocket, it seems like an odd thing to be talking about, but it does bring such feelings. It really inspires a strong feeling of agency, autonomy, and joy. Why do we love our pockets?
That is exactly what I was trying to capture in the title. Thanks, it has pockets. Is that sense of joy and wonder and delight that many people feel and experience when, surprise, surprise, that garment you like and try on and take home also has pockets. That reaction must be the other side of the coin to having experienced the opposite, the lack of pockets. We can only experience the joy and sense of autonomy and that I can go out in the world and carry my possessions around with me in a secure manner is the result of having been denied that feeling. And I think it is absolutely remarkable that in the hundreds of years that this exhibition covers, in an ever dramatically changing world, both big picture and in terms of fashion, that the pocket continues to resonate is remarkable.
There is something so wonderful about having that freedom.
Another possible avenue of joy related to pockets that we explore in the exhibition is finding something in your pocket.
Oh, yeah.
Money, an earring. I found sunglasses in a pocket recently. So we also can both lose things in pockets or potentially give our future self the gift of finding something in a pocket.
Mm-hmm. So my mother passed away in June, and I kept some of her sweaters, her cardigans that she would always be wearing. And when I pulled one of them out and I put my hands in it, I found Kleenex, clean Kleenex. But it made me laugh because my mother was always known to have a wad of Kleenex in her pockets, and she'd always have one at the ready. So it gave me just this moment. I just left them in there.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so sweet. My grandfather always carried in his pocket a gold coin, like from the Canadian Mint, like one of those solid gold coins. I think it was his, mentality of no matter what happens, I always have something valuable.
Mm-hmm.
If I get into trouble, I always have something. Keeping valuables close to us
Mm-hmm.
in pockets, that space kind of between the outside world and the body, the space of intimacy, is also where people keep sentimental valuables.
Well, thank you so much for talking with me about this. I really appreciate it. It's been so great. It's been really fascinating.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure to share the joy of pockets.
That was Avenir curator Paula Alaszkiewicz speaking about the museum's current exhibit, Thanks, It Has Pockets. The exhibition is on display through March 14th. I'm your host, Stacey Nick, and you're listening to CSU's The Audit.